enters Gaza after 2 days without aid. United Nations warns against unilateral safe zone in Gaza, cites hunger risk. Good afternoon and Salam Malaysia Madani. I'm Jessica Lee and this is World Today. Prime Minister Datuk Sri Anwar Ibrahim met with his Canadian counterpart Justin Trudeau at the sidelines of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation or the APEC Leaders Summit in San Francisco. Now, the leaders celebrated the strong bilateral ties between Canada and Malaysia and the growing trade and investment links between the two countries. Both leaders discussed the progress on implementing Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy as they explored areas where Canada and Malaysia can deepen cooperation, including on nuclear energy, education and good governance. They also welcomed the significant agreement signed on the margins of the APEC summit for Canadian company BlackBerry to provide cybersecurity-related products and services to the government of Malaysia. The total trade between Malaysia and Canada in 2022 was $2.35 billion, an increase of 4.2% from the $2.39 billion recorded in 2021. Putrajaya and Ottawa celebrate 66 years of official diplomatic relations this year. Now, the first consignment of fuel has entered Gaza after Israel bowed to U.S. pressure for limited deliveries to allow wastewater treatment and the resumption of communications after a 2-day blackout. Now, the first delivery arrived from Egypt late Friday as UN officials warned of an increasingly desperate situation for 2.4 million Palestinians and pleaded for a ceasefire. Under the deal, 140,000 litres of fuel will be allowed in every 48 hours, of which 20,000 litres will be earmarked for generators to restore the phone network. Communications have been down for 2 days after fuel ran out, and the first consignment of some 17,000 litres was earmarked for telecommunications company Paltel. The UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees said the communications blackout hampered 8 deliveries, with humanitarian chief Martin Griffiths telling the UN General Assembly that fuel supplies to the agency so far were a fraction of what is needed to meet the minimum of our humanitarian responsibilities. The health ministry in the Hamas-ruled territory said 24 patients had died in 48 hours due to the lack of fuel for generators. Meantime, World Health Organization or WHO will not take part in any unilateral proposals to create safe zones in the Gaza Strip. Its chief, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said such measures would risk causing harm to civilians, including large-scale loss of lives under current conditions in the enclave. Adhanom Ghebreyesus spoke of dire consequences in cramming people into an area with inadequate infrastructure, such as Al-Mawasi on the southern Gaza Strip.
Attempting to cram so many people into such a small area with such little infrastructure or services will significantly increase risks to health for people who are already on the brink. WHO will not participate in the establishment of any so-called safe zone in Gaza without broad agreement and unless fundamental conditions are in place to ensure safety and other essential needs are met and a mechanism is in place to supervise its implementation.
The President of the General Assembly, Dennis Francis, echoed the urgency for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, emphasizing the immediate need for unimpeded humanitarian access. The gravity of the situation was further highlighted by Paul Scholes, the director of the New York office of the World Food Programme, who revealed alarming statistics. He indicated the majority of Gaza's population is now reliant on food assistance, with reports suggesting people surviving on only one meal a day. Riyad Mansour, the permanent observer of Palestine to the United Nations, urged the international community to heed the calls for an immediate ceasefire. Meanwhile, EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell urged Israel not to be consumed by rage in its response to last month's Hamas attack, declaring that one horror does not justify another, as Israeli forces wage war in Gaza. Now, at a joint news conference with the Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh, Borrell called the war against Hamas in Gaza as the outcome of a collective, political, a moral failure of the international community. On his first visit to Israel and the West Bank since 7th of October, Borrell sought to express solidarity with his hosts and reflect international concern about Palestinian civilian casualties as Israeli forces seek to destroy Hamas in Gaza. Borrell's balancing act also reflected an attempt to stick to a middle ground acceptable to all 27 EU countries who have deeply rooted differences about the wider Israeli-Palestinian conflict that have come to the fore in the current crisis.
But the European Union has also firmly stressed that the way that Israel performed its right to defense matters. That Israel needs to respect international humanitarian law and the principle of proportionality. And I passed this message yesterday, face to face, in very clear terms, to the Israeli authorities with which I met. A horror doesn't justify another horror.
He also called upon Israel to heed international calls to do more to help and protect civilians in Gaza. In Germany, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan lashes out at Israel, saying that attacks on children and hospitals had no place in the Jewish holy book. Now, he also said that Germany supported Israel out of guilt at the Holocaust, saying that Turkey's lack of historical indebtedness let it speak freely on the Israel-Hamas conflict.
Bakın, İbadethaneler vuruluyor, kiliseler vuruluyor. Bütün bunlarla beraber hastaneler vuruluyor. Halbuki bütün bunların yanında hastanelerin vurulması, çocukların öldürülmesi, Tevrat'ta filan bunların hiçbirisi yoktur. Yapamazsın. İnsan hakları beyannamesinde yapamazsın.
Erdogan's comments rubbed salt into a wound for Germany, which has seen an uptick in anti-Semitism and Islamophobia since the conflict began and has faced criticism for making it hard for pro-Palestinian groups to protest on behalf of friends or relatives in Gaza out of fear that such protests might be anti-Semitic. Amid such sharp differences, the two leaders stressing of areas in which they agreed, including on the importance of maintaining the deal allowing Russia and Ukraine to export grain despite their conflict, and the importance of their economic ties rang hollow. Elsewhere, an annual march to mark the anniversary of a bloody 1973 student uprising turned its focus to the Israel-Hamas war, with protesters showing their support for Palestinians and calling for an end to strikes on Gaza. Police estimated at least 25,000 participated in the protest march, which usually ends at the U.S. Embassy, but this year, protesters continued to the Israeli Embassy. Protesters carried Palestinian flags and banners reading "Free Palestine," while many wore keffiyehs in the Palestinian colors. Meanwhile, on the same day, dozens of protesters gathered in Washington, D.C., demanding humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Protesters met in front of Union Station, chanting slogans, carrying banners, and calling on the U.S. government to stop economic aid to Israel. U.S. President Joe Biden and his administration are under increasing pressure for their stance on the war and unconditional support to Israel. Coming up, Finland closes key Russian border crossings.
Kita telah perkenalkan pasukan petugas khas reformasi agensi STAR yang dipusikan oleh Tan Sri Ketua Susah Negara. Jadi mempercepat pelaksanaan projek, khususnya melibatkan isu kesesakan di hospital dan pembaikan sekolah dan klinik time. Tahun depan, insya-Allah, pasukan STAR diberi tanggungjawab untuk mempercepat pelaksanaan projek selenggara lift RM91 juta, kuartus kerajaan RM170 juta. RM2.4 bilion diperuntukkan untuk membina, menyelenggara dan membaik pulih kuartus penjawat awam, guru, hospital, polis, tentera dan bomba.
Welcome back. Now, Finland has closed 4 crossings on its border with Russia as Helsinki seeks to halt a flow of asylum seekers it says was instigated by Moscow. Now, authorities have accused Moscow of seeking to destabilize Finland by letting undocumented migrants, mainly from the Middle East and Africa, cross into the Nordic country. The Finnish border guard announced it would erect barriers at the Valima, Nuujama, Imatra and Nirala border posts in southeast Finland, which account for much of the travel between the two countries. Now, Finland, which shares a 1,340-kilometer border with Russia, has seen increased numbers of asylum seekers since August, particularly nationals of Iraq, Somalia and Yemen. On Thursday, Prime Minister Petteri Orpo said Russia was deliberately seeking to destabilize Finland in retaliation for it joining NATO this year. Now, he said there were signs that entering Finland is being aided and encouraged, and the government was prepared for acts of malice by Russia. Liberia President George Weah conceded election defeat to opposition leader Joseph Boakai after a tight race, ending a presidency marred by graft allegations, but helping to ensure a smooth transition of power in the once volatile African nation. Boakai, 78, a former vice president who lost to Weah in the 2017 election, led with 50.9% of the vote over Weah's 49.1%, with nearly all the votes counted. The result marks a stark turnaround from 2017 when global football legend Weah, buoyed by a wave of hope, trounced Boakai with 62% of the vote. Many have since grown disillusioned with the lack of progress. Poverty, unemployment, food insecurity and poor electricity supply persist. Weah's concession paves the way for Liberia's second democratic transfer of power in over 7 decades. His comments stood out in West and Central Africa, where there have been 8 military coups in 3 years, eroding faith in democracy. When elections do go ahead in the region, accusations of fraud abound and results are frequently contested in courts. Now, SpaceX is poised for the second test launch of the Starship, the largest rocket ever built that Elon Musk hopes will one day colonize Mars, while NASA awaits the modified version to land humans on the moon. Now, it comes after a first attempt to fly the spaceship in its fully stacked configuration back in April ended in a spectacular explosion over the Gulf of Mexico. Blast off from the company's starbase in Boca Chica, Texas, is set for 7 a.m. local time on Saturday with a launch window of 20 minutes. The event will be live streamed on both SpaceX's website and on X. When the 2 stages of Starship are combined, the rocket stands 397 feet tall, beating the Statue of Liberty by a comfortable 90 feet. Its super heavy booster produces 16.7 million pounds of thrust, almost double that of the world's second most powerful rocket, NASA's Space Launch System, SLS. Now, if the flight is successful, the booster will land in the Gulf of Mexico a few minutes after the launch, while the upper stage will complete a partial trip around the Earth, almost obtaining orbital velocity, before belly flopping into the Pacific Ocean near Hawaii after 90 minutes. South Korea aims to ban eating dog meat and put an end to the controversy over the ancient custom amid growing awareness of animal rights. The government and ruling party will introduce a bill this year to enforce a ban, and with expected bipartisan support, the bill should sail through Parliament. Animal rights groups welcome the prospect of a ban, while dog meat farmers held a protest rally in front of Parliament saying the decision is ignoring farmers' right to live. According to government data, there are about 1,150 dog breeding farms, 34 slaughterhouses, 219 distribution companies, and some 1,600 restaurants serving dog meat. A shooter killed one person in the lobby of New Hampshire's psychiatric hospital and then was fatally shot by a state trooper. The shooting erupted at about 3:40 p.m. local time, and the motive of the shooter remains unclear. The 184-bed hospital is situated on the grounds of a 120-acre campus that is home to other state agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Education, and the Public Utility Commission. The Friday shooting was the latest act of violence at a U.S. hospital. Medical centers nationwide have struggled to adapt to the growing threats, which have made healthcare centers as one of the nation's most violent fields. Heavy rains pounded the streets of Kenyan coastal city of Mombasa, with some passengers evacuated from a flooded bus by holding on to a rope amid chest-high waters. Now, heavy rains followed by flash floods have submerged towns across East Africa, rendering hundreds of thousands of people homeless. With their homes submerged, residents of Bamburi town held the government responsible for failing to unblock and repair drains. At least 46 people have died in flood-related incidents in Kenya since the rainy season began less than a month ago, and the toll is expected to rise. Fires continue to rage through the wilderness of the Brazilian Pantanal, the world's largest wetlands, where more than 2,300 fires have been recorded in the first days of November. Now, images provided by the Instituto Homem Pantanero, a non-governmental organization dedicated to preserving the Pantanal biome, showed fires blazing through dry underbrush and riverbanks. Now, the fires started in October and have already destroyed 35,000 hectares, a scenario aggravated by drought and intense heat. The Pantanal is smaller and less known than its famous cousin, the Amazon. But the region's normally abundant waters and strategic location make it a magnet for animals. Coming up in sport, Denmark edged out Slovenia to book Euro 2024 spot alongside Albania. First up is tennis. Carlos Alcaraz set up an ATP Finals last four showdown with Novak Djokovic after beating Daniil Medvedev 6-4, 6-4 and topping the red group. Now, world number 2 Alcaraz needed to win to ensure a spot in the last four of his debut appearance at the season-ending tournament. And he did just that in impressive fashion, cruising to a straight sets victory, which ensured him first place ahead of Medvedev. Alcaraz also gained a small measure of revenge for defeat in the US Open semi-finals against Medvedev, who finished second in the group after having already qualified for the semis on Wednesday. Now, Alcaraz came into the finals struggling with form and injury, but has warmed up as the tournament has progressed, and his semi-final with Djokovic promises to be a blockbuster. Djokovic, who has already secured the year-end top spot in the world rankings, is gunning for a record-breaking 7th finals triumph after qualifying second in the green group. And moving on to football, Denmark booked their spot in the Euro 2024 finals with a 2-1 win in their crunch match against Slovenia. Albania also qualified on Friday, drawing 1-1 in Moldova to ensure they would finish in the top 2 in Group E. In Group H, Denmark and Slovenia teams were able to qualify with a win in Copenhagen, but the hosts claimed the spoils with goals either side of the break by Joachim Mæhle and Thomas Delaney. Now, Denmark had the better of the opening exchanges and were rewarded when Mæhle slid in at the far post to tuck away an in-swinging cross on 26 minutes. But the lead only lasted 4 minutes before Erik Jansa called a left-footed free kick beyond Kasper Schmeichel. A tight, touchy affair was swung in Denmark's favour 9 minutes after half-time when Delaney controlled and finished in the box after Yannick Vestergaard's flick-on. Earlier, Albania clinched a place at Euro 2024 despite conceding a late equaliser as they drew 1-1 in Moldova. Soko Cikaleshi put the visitors ahead with a first-half penalty, and although Vladislav Babolo levelled with 3 minutes left, the point ensured Albania will finish in the top 2 in Group E. It will be Albania's second appearance at a major tournament after their debut at Euro 2016. Elsewhere, Italy took a big step towards qualification for Euro 2024 after an eventful 5-2 win over North Macedonia. Federico Chiesa struck twice in the first half after Matteo Darmian nodded the host into an early lead. Giacomo Raspadori and Stefan El Sha'arawi secured the 3 points late on, and 2 second-half strikes from Yanni Atanasov threatened a tense night for the Azzurri. Now, the win at the Stadio Olimpico in Rome moved Italy into second in Group C behind already qualified England. It means that Luciano Spalletti's team need only draw against third-place Ukraine in Leverkusen on Monday to book a place in next summer's tournament in Germany. Now, Manchester United's American owners, the Glazer family, are set to finalise a $33 per share deal with Jim Ratcliffe that will see the British billionaire acquire a 25% stake in the English soccer club. Now, Sky News reported this on Friday. Sky News reported the deal was yet to be finalised and remained the subject of ongoing negotiations. Now, the club did not immediately respond to a Reuters request for comment. Reuters reported in October that Ratcliffe would pay more than $1.5 billion for a 25% stake in United, were his bid for the iconic soccer club to be accepted by the Glazer family that controls it. Now, earlier this week, Manchester United confirmed the club CEO, Richard Arnold, will step down, with the General Counsels and the Board Director, Patrick Stewart, becoming the interim CEO, allowing the club's future owners to take time to identify a new long-term CEO. Now, under Arnold's leadership, United posted record revenues and backed a couple of major sponsorship deals, including a $1.1 billion Adidas kit deal for 10 more years in August. Now, Stewart, who will stay on his current role as General Counsel, leads the club liaison with governing bodies such as the FA and the UEFA. From a celebratory light show to the birth of endangered Sumatran elephant, here are your weekly roundup of offbeat stories from around the world. For many, gaming is a waste of time. Now, hours lost staring at glowing screens. But Jordan is betting on its youths to capture a slice of a lucrative global market. Set up in 2011, the Jordan Gaming Lab aims to help young people develop and design their own games. With the support of King Abdullah II Fund for Development, it provides modern equipment and free educational courses to young people aged 9 and above on all aspects of the gaming industry, from manufacturing to production and even marketing.
والحمد لله اليوم عندنا أكثر من 10,000 عضو موجودين منتشرين في مختبرات الألعاب الأردنية بالمملكة، وعندنا تعاون مع المؤسسات المحلية والعربية والعالمية، ومن خلالها سنويا بنستضيف مؤتمر عالمي في الأردن من 12 سنة.
The fund would not disclose how much money has been spent over the years, but it represents a significant investment by the Hashemite Kingdom in its young people.
انولدت وأنا بحبه يعني، بحب كل السيارات وبعرف السيارات، فحكيت خلص هذا إشي مناسب إلي ولازم أبلش أعمله، وشفته كثير حلو يعني، وأكيد السيارات راح أستفيد منها، بدي أحطها بالجيمز، وممكن أحطها على مواقع زي موقع اسمه بيهانس تنباع الموديلز وبأسعار حلوة يعني.
There are now more than 12 game publishing and developing companies in Jordan, including the first mobile games development studio, May Salward, which now has more than 100 games on Apple Store and Google Play. Kew Gardens in southwest London presents the 11th edition of Christmas at Kew, its popular festive light show featuring 22 artistic installations in a nocturnal tour of the Botanic Gardens on display until the 7th of January. Now, this year's show focuses on environmental protection, and all the lighting structures, including an impressive giant beehive, are inspired by the natural world.
We worked with an artist called Novak, and we have some beautiful light floor projections with some really, really important messages, and it's called One Small Thing. So we're asking people to do one small thing in their own lives to help nature. And then we have another installation down in the gardens, and that is a re-greening a tree. We're asking people to tie a small little ribbon, green ribbon, on a white tree, and over 48 nights of Christmas at Kew, that tree will grow and re-green. We're asking people, when they tie that ribbon on, just to make one small promise, again, to do one small thing in their everyday life to try and take that little step more in sustainability. And then afterwards, we'll plant a tree here in Kew Gardens as a direct representation of all the promises and hopes and dreams that people have made on the night here.
The show itself is using 40% less power than in previous years. A critically endangered Sumatran elephant was born in western Indonesia last week, giving renewed hope to conservation efforts after several other baby elephants and rhino births in recent months. Now weighing about 108 kilograms, the yet-to-be-named male calf was born at the Waikambas National Park in Lampung province in southern Sumatra. The new addition to the elephant herd at the Waikambas comes after a baby Sumatran rhino was born there in September. Now, according to the World Wildlife Fund, Sumatran elephants are on the brink of extinction, with only about 2,400 to 2,800 left in the world. The elephant population is threatened by rampant poaching for their tusks, which are prized in the illegal wildlife trade. Deforestation has reduced the critically endangered elephants' natural habitat and brought them into the increasing conflict with humans. And that concludes our bulletin this afternoon. In our top story, fuel enters Gaza after 2 days without aid. Do join us again tonight at 8:30 p.m. on TV1 and saluran Berita RTM for more updates. I'm Jessica Lee. Thank you for watching. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free.